Hello, everyone. We are here for a super special episode today. I have a good friend of mine, Hendrix Black, who is the author of Shadow Money. And this book was one of the books that when I'm always writing books about money. This book really helped open up my eyes. And so I loved it. I loved everything about it. And so I reached out to him. And now we're friends. We're here on a podcast together. We're going to talk about this book so you could learn all the things too. So Hendrix, do you want to, say hi to everybody?
Yeah. I mean, I've never been prompted to say hi to everybody, so I'm going to say hi to everybody. Hello, everybody. Yeah, no, such a pleasure to be here. I think we connected a long time ago, and I'm so irresponsible with my Instagram messages that it took a year to finally get this going. So yeah, grateful to finally be here and do this.
Oh,
yeah.
Good. Well, how did you get into money work? Tell us that, because your pen name is the Money Shaman, which I like.
Yes.
I feel like it's a bold claim. I like that for you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. It felt bold at the time. It kind of came up in my awareness and I'm like, really? We're going to roll with that? Are we sure? Yeah. And before you knew it, we were that. So there you go. I mean, how did I get into money work? I think everything is money work. We're immersed in it throughout our entire lives, right? We're constantly interacting with money and we're constantly doing money work, whether that's done consciously and with intention or unconsciously. And obviously the things we do unconsciously are typically done unskillfully. And I just decided to do it more skillfully. Really how it came to be in a more, I guess, professional coaching type client setting, right, was, I've been working in various domains over the last 2 decades, right, from client work in the copywriting and marketing spaces to in the relationship space over the last few years. And time again, right, one of the major blockages that people will come up with, whether it's in business or relationship or intimacy, money has so much overlap with these spaces, right? And I found myself often doing more money work with these clients than the thing that they asked me to do in the first place, right? So that's how it came to be. Obviously, over the years and through dozens of coaching settings and clients and facilitations, right, it came into my awareness patterns, right? I'm always seeing patterns, right? What are the groupings of shadows people experience around certain things. And within that, I started tuning into and sensing, right, a consciousness or the signature of the money of those clients, right? A certain vibration coming off of that, a certain level of information presenting itself, right, around the qualities, the textures, the vibration of the money they were talking about or in reference to or trying to call in that always seems just out of reach, right? And never coming in, right? So yeah, that's kind of how it came to be. It wasn't a calling I've had forever. It was just something that kind of kept pulling me into it. And I'm like, all right, it's time to kind of collect all this information, all the things coming through my awareness, all these things I've been facilitating and put it in a book, right? And that's kind of really how we got to where we are.
All right. Well, so your book is the Shadow of Money, right? Or Shadow Money.
Shadow Money,
and
yeah.
Actually, why don't you just explain to everybody what a shadow is, right? I feel like that's kind of a term that everybody might not know. So yeah, what are you even talking about? What's a shadow? And then we could talk about the shadow of money.
Ooh, I like that voice tone. That was very thriller, cinematic. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm an actress, basically. No, I'm not. I do my best.
You totally had me convinced on that. You could have rolled with I'm an actress and I would have totally been all in on that. So
yeah. I'm just a lady who has a podcast. But
yeah, so shadows, right? Shadows are obviously, if we take a Jungian definition of it, right, the thing we least want to be, right? So if we kind of applied that term, right, it's the things we least want to be when it comes to money, right? And thus we deny it, we suppress it, we avoid it, we hide it into the darker chasms of our subconscious, and it leaks, right? It erodes the quality of our life, right? Because it operates within those shadows, right? Even though it's suppressed there, right? So I'll give you an example. This has come up in so many conversations, especially with men, right? This is a money shadow that exists in everyone to some degree, but particularly with men. I've run a lot of men's circles, men's groups in the past, right? And the idea of Prospericide, it's one of them, that one of the money shadows I talk about in the book, I believe, right? And that is essentially weaponizing money, using it as a control vehicle, right? I'm using it to punish, right? To restrict access to resource or to give it back as reward, to use it to control one's behavior as a distorted sense of power, right? So that is a money shadow, right? Money is implicated within a shadow pattern that is ultimately destructive, harmful, and distorted, and a means of a false claim of power.
Mm.
So yeah, that's one of several money shadows that I came across or came into my awareness through the years. This is one of the more destructive ones that I believe has so many damaging implications to relationships, to families, right? To just our healthy ways of being and relating, right? To money, using it as a weapon, right? And yeah, my goal, right, with this book was to just elucidate, to like bring into awareness and illuminate these subterranean patterns, right? And I think
Yeah.
just in reading them, having them exposed, you're like, ooh, fuck, that's there, right?
Oh yeah, no, when you said that, it's so one, I've had clients, like I had one client whose dad was very much controlling with his resources, and it was a really weird dynamic because she wouldn't receive what he wanted to give her because there were strings, and the strings were not like, it wasn't clearly out, like there was no clarity, so it was all
Right.
kind of yuck yuck. And it's fascinating because sometimes I'll even feel myself want to do that with my own kids. While I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm paying for your stuff, so do your chores, right? Like,
Totally.
and like, not super damaging ways, but that the shadow is still there, like the pattern still exists.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, these are collective shadows as well, right? That like seep into our individual shadows, right? So, like this idea of prospericide, right? Or using money as a weapon, right? Like that exists, right? That is strengthened through so many people actively partaking in that to whatever degrees, right? We're
Mm,
exposed to that constantly. So, it's like, it's not a matter of finger pointing or trying to create shame out of like, oof, I do this, right? Like, we
yeah.
need to be able to separate the shame in the shadow work, right? You can't do proper shadow work or money work with shame present, right? You're just not going to be able to truly authentically see this is there. And if you could say the, oh, yes, this is there without shame, right? With just awareness, I call it fierce grace in the book, right? Just seeing this is operating here. And if you could view that non judgmentally, a lot of the times, right? Like the alchemy will begin there, right? You see a pattern and you can commit to just, I don't want to participate in this mechanism of control or in this relationship to money anymore, right? And sometimes that's enough. If you could just feel it in your body, right? Sense, oof, I no longer want to operate this way. Sometimes that's enough. And that was really my goal with writing the book, right? Obviously, you do client work. There's only a certain amount of people you can ever work with one-on-one, right? But yet so many people carry some patterns, these patterns, right? And if we could just expose and illuminate the different types of blocks, the different kinds of shadows, and have someone identify, right? Oof, this is present. This doesn't feel good. This isn't serving me. This isn't serving my family. This isn't serving the world. I release it. I let it go, right? Like,
Oh, so good. So, what's another common shadow that comes up for people? Like, what's another one of your favorite ones to talk about?
yeah, another one that comes up quite frequently is obviously money as a savior, right? Money
Oh,
as a god, money as a savior. Um, and there's so much distortion in that, right? Like where you're looking for a savior, well, who needs a savior, right? Ultimately, a victim, right? And you're relating and cementing from an identity that literally can't ever achieve the freedom, the relaxation, the abundance you want, right? You need to be able to transcend identity before you can enjoy the fruits of that which you need and that which you want. So, money as a savior, right? You see that obviously culturally, almost religiously in the lottery, right? Millions and millions of people
uh,
like just saying, save me, right? I need to be saved and pulled out of this situation. And obviously, that stems from a belief of destitution, impossibility against this quote unquote system, right? Being so indebted, so buried that any form of working one's way out feels impossible, right?
mm,
And yeah, this is a really challenging, icky, sticky one, right? Because there are obviously systemic challenges across, many different systems, right? That make it hard if you are participating in certain games with certain levels of difficulty. And, I'll continue to assert that relating to money as a victim, being so entrained in systems of scarcity and seeing money as a savior that needs to choose you at some point, right? It's ultimately an unwinnable game. An unwinnable game, sorry.
oh, that's so, yeah. Actually, I remember when I read the book, that was one I was like,
Mm,
like
yeah.
I was like, oh, this book is reading me for filth.
Mm,
It's fascinating. It's funny because in my work, I'm in other people's money all day. And what's interesting about it is being in other people's stuff, you can see really, really clearly. Like when I'm looking at somebody's business, I get like that eagle eye view. I get to be like, oh, this is the exact problem. And I can pinpoint it because I'm not in the situation. But it's so fascinating because when I was reading this book, I was really reading it for me. And I was like, this is a good one. So how would somebody know that they're in like the victim state around money? Like how would they know that that dynamic is present?
yeah. I mean, there's some very like obvious surface level litmus tests, right? When you're quote unquote paying a bill, right? Even at a restaurant, even the coffee order at Starbucks, right? Obviously, that's like a very micro type of transaction, like a few dollars. But do you feel essentially victimized in paying money? Do you feel victimized if you get an invoice, right? Even if it's like your tax invoice or this or that, right? Like, do you feel victimized when money outflows from your accounts, right? So outflows being experienced as attack, as something or someone attacking you is a very clear sign of being victimized by money, right? Versus participating, right, in a constant flow, right? Inflows, outflows. And obviously, I think most beings endeavor to achieve a homeostasis where their inflows vastly and continuously outpace their outflows, right? To me, that is the definition of financial freedom at its like purest, rawest form, right? Your
Yeah.
inflows vastly outpace your outflows. But if those outflows, right, which is a very natural part of currency and the movement of money, if outflows in of themselves, if the movement of money moving out feels burdening, stressful, victimizing, right, then there is wrong relationship within a very essential function of money, if that makes sense.
All right. And then, so let's just say somebody's listening and they're like, oh, holy crap, this is me. What do you do with that once you can see it?
Yeah, I think like first make the decision, right? Like, is this a pattern that serves me, right? Where does this even come from? Is this part of my original innate design or is this adopted in some way, shape, or form, right? And ultimately, it's my belief and my sense that all these patterns, all these shadow identities, all the ones carrying this burden and this weight that doesn't feel life enhancing, the destiny of these are wholeness, right? It's not something we're meant to carry forever, right? It's something we're meant to allow to disentangle and to reintegrate back into wholeness in its right and perfect timing. So I think like if you're hearing these words or if you're reading them in a book or listening to them in any of your podcast episodes and something strikes and says, oof, this is here. I can see myself in this. It doesn't feel good. I think that those are incredible moments of choice and of alchemy, right? Like,
Mm.
what a gift to be able to have someone hold a mirror, right? And you see that in yourself and be like, wow, I've been living this. Like, that is the precursor to liberation, right? Like, at the end of the day.
Yeah, because I feel like so much of these, well, obviously, subconscious patterning we pick up when we're kids or at some point in our lives. And so that victim mentality around money, I think, like that was for sure something that I feel like we've all seen growing up.
Yeah.
Like we've all seen it. And it's fascinating. This is a silly little story, but one time I was at Disney and there was a family behind me, like in line at like a little vending machine. And I think the water was maybe like $6 or it was like something that seemed like a little egregious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fella behind me was buying the bottles of water and he was so mad and so victimized
Mm.
by this purchase that you could see it suck the joy out of
Yeah.
the cold water for everybody that he was buying this water for. Like
Right.
I was like, damn, this dude just ruined this water. Like they might as well just be thirsty. Like he ruined it for everybody.
Totally. Right. We're so sensitive to these emotional expressions, especially ones of charge, right? And it's like we receive it, we're energetic beings, it lands, it imprints, right? And now, the next time you're at an airport, right, and you need water before boarding and you see it's $7, right, or whatever it is, like
Yeah.
that's going to register too. The Disney example brought up like another thing I want to touch on. It's such a
Oh, please.
valuable money shadow that I think is hyper practical for anyone listening, right? Tracing back to the first time, right? to receive money for a job or a service, right? And what were the conditions attached to that? So many times I've seen the conditions of that first paycheck being superimposed to this is how I receive money in perpetuity, right? So taking the Disney example, right? Like if one's first job is to be, what do they call them? Like the characters, the ones who like play.
Oh, the cast?
Yeah,
Yeah.
cast.
Yeah.
I saw a video of this once. I think it was like Gaston, right? So there is some like human who plays Gaston there, right? And that might be like one of his early jobs. He might have obviously desires and ambitions to be something else. I don't think many people grow up saying, I want to be Gaston at Disneyland, but let's just roll with it, right? Like he's doing that job, right? And I once saw, I think it was a TikTok or an Instagram reel or something where like this Gaston character or cast was like being harassed, like people were just like touching his muscles and like, you know, just harassing the dude, right? And like in a very violating way to the point where he had to like kind of stand his ground, right? If the first time you're getting paid involves self-abandonment, enduring violation, right? Getting paid, you know, a barely livable wage for hard labor, right? In many kinds of construction jobs or whatever. If you had to give more than you got in a very imbalanced way, that is how it imprints of I receive money when, right? And you think about all the women like service jobs, waitressing jobs, right? As first jobs where you had to put on the smile, right? Endure bullshit, ultimately, right? Appease, right? Self-abandon. These things get imprinted, right? So like one exercise I think that is relevant for everybody is like, what were the conditions present in the first time you got paid, right? What did you have to endure? What did you have to accept, right? And just consciously rewrite those conditions and say, I now receive money within these conditions, right? So rewrite that script for oneself, because that first paycheck, that first job tends to leave a pretty lasting imprint in this is how I receive money.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking, I'm like, all my early jobs, they weren't the best jobs. Like,
Right.
it's like those early jobs, like your first opportunities usually aren't super well paid. You know, you're usually, and there's at least a little bit of enduring, right? In
For
those
sure.
earlier jobs for most
Totally.
people.
Yeah. And even like on the parenting side, right? If you're parenting, you know, teenagers, right? Or people who are just coming into the workforce, right? And like working jobs that aren't quite it, right? Like they're enduring more, right? Like I would be very vocal about that, right? Like, yes, perhaps you're building character, right? You're getting experience, you're doing this, but this isn't the relationship between life force and money, right? Like you get to grow in your experience, you get to grow in your capacity to serve, you get to grow in your ability to innovate, right? And receive exponential reward for what you do, right? So just like have these open conversations that like, just because this is what it looks like now, right? In this context, this isn't the relationship between like what you give and what you get, right? This is just a very isolated presentation of that is relevant to where you are right now, right?
Yes. Yeah. Kind of just putting it as like circumstance and not like overall overarching, this is the way things are.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Well, maybe tell us one more shadow. I'm fascinated by this discussion. What's one other one that that comes up for you a lot in your client work or life?
Yeah. Let me reflect on one of the most like because there's constant exposure to more and more shadows, right? Obviously I named the ones in the book that I've seen over and over again, but I'm trying to like tune into one that I saw most recently. Okay. Yeah, this is a good one. This is a very like clear litmus test once again, right? Especially in the online space, right? I mean, Instagram culture where people celebrate wins, right? How do you feel when people have success, right? So I call that one like financial Schadenfreude. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly on the spot.
Let's just tell people what
Well,
word means.
it's a
I
it's a
don't know how
German
to say it either.
it's a German word. I don't want to butcher it in German for the Germans listening here, but Schadenfreude,
I
Schadenfreude.
think
Yeah.
that's close enough. I know what you're saying,
There
but
you go. So
I
it's
don't know.
essentially it's taking delight in the suffering of others, right? And it's essentially a refusal to witness them in success and joy, right? So it's like imagine yourself in a group chat, right, on WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever with some of your like best friends, and someone like announces like a huge win, right? Like I just got, you know, a new job that pays double my last, right? For example, right? What is your immediate reaction, right? Is it like a genuine joy and celebration for her? Or is it a fuck, why her? Why not me? I'm more deserving. She's not. this doesn't feel good. And then like the fake smile and the, celebrating you, girl, right? Like, what is the first immediate visceral, guttural reaction that comes up when you witness somebody's financial success, right? And where there's financial Schadenfreude is if that immediate visceral reaction is, negative, questioning their deservingness, right? Wanting to see it taken away, wanting the opportunity to fall through, wanting something bad to happen to quote unquote balance the scales, right? Now, if you feel that towards someone else, right, that shadow is also present towards yourself, right? And your own sense of self-deservedness, right? So that's a really uncomfortable but vital one to tune into. And there's so much opportunity to practice it, right?
But yeah, I feel like you could feel envious scrolling anywhere. People are on vacation, it's cold in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I remember one of the masterminds that I was in, there was another woman there who I love this lady. She's a friend of mine. But I remember when she first hit 7 figures in her business, it was well before I got even close to that. I remember I was feeling both. Like I was like really happy for her and I was also super envious. So it's fascinating because when you really look at it, you can see it in yourself, right? It's like that's kind of the thing about it. In your experience working with clients, how do you help them to kind of overcome the shame of it? Because I notice like when we're in these darker places and we're more in our shadowy selves, I think a lot of times it's the shame that keeps people in the dark because looking at these little like crunchier bits of ourselves is uncomfortable.
Of course. I mean, it's uncomfortable because we believe, and I think this belief is justified, that if this was known about us, at least socially, right, that it would be tremendously frowned upon, right, if not rejected and leave us outcasted and blah, 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 right? And I think that's very much true, right? Like if you owned a shadow, right, on that group thread and said, part of me is happy for you, but another part of me hopes you lose it, right? Like you're going to be,
it's a little too honest. Yeah, it's too...
Exactly. So, how do we approach these things without shame, right? I think it's obviously allowing them to arise within a space that is designed to hold it. And that space is ultimately your private inner space. I don't necessarily mean with a coach or a therapist, although those are spaces you can do this work in. But literally, like having that reaction, being with yourself, saying, what else is here? I am willing and available to see it because seeing this shadow is ultimately safer than denying it and suppressing it and allowing it to operate beneath the shadows, right? So yeah, I'd say like simply being more committed to the liberation from them than the pretending they're not there, right?
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's like that. I feel like the awareness of something like this is usually, I find, the hardest part. It's even starting to see it. And then, because once you can see it, then you're in the place of power, then you can choose, right? So you said that before. So it's like once you decide that you don't want to do this anymore, then you have a lot more authority. But it's like when you can't see it, sometimes patterns will run and run and run. And you're like, why does this keep happening?
Right.
And you can't really, figure out like what you need to do differently.
I mean, that suppression will happen, right? Either because it's socially or sometimes like physically, emotionally dangerous to admit they are there, right? So that is a form of skillful suppression, I'll call it, right? That is like not saying it on the group thread, right? And then there's I'd say like the self protection and the self suppression where those shadows go against your idealized self image, right? Like we all have this is who I am, right? And anything that is counter to that image tends to get pushed aside. Like I want to see myself as generous and benevolent and humanity's biggest cheerleader, right? If that's something I've decided, then if I feel envy and jealousy and Schadenfreude arise in my system, she's undeserving, I hope she loses it, right? Like, oof, I can't let that be. That's a counter argument to everything I just said I am, right? So it's the dissonance between those two things that also keeps it suppressed, right? But I think having the humility to know that we are obviously much deeper than our idealized self-image would like us to be, you could spend your whole life trying to maintain that and curate only the parts of you that fit within that box and reject and suppress everything that doesn't fit within it. And ultimately, there's a ton of suffering in that and a stunting of your potential growth and healing and freedom from these mechanisms. So,
and also it's an illusion. I'm like, anytime you're disowning these parts of you, they're just showing up sideways and in ways that you won't see for yourself.
totally.
Right.
Yep.
It's like, it's like the clients who are so generous, so overgiving, overdoing it. It's like that is selfish in a way that they might not see, right? Like they don't see the ways that when it goes far enough in one direction, you just are back where you started.
Right.
So it's like, instead of taking care of oneself,
Mm-hmm.
now we're working until we're sick, or we're working until,
Mm-hmm.
those sorts of things. So
Yeah.
I love shadow work. And I will say that I find shadow work to be super lucrative
Mm-hmm.
because when you liberate those aspects of yourself, one, you can see them so you can have more, I would call it like authority over yourself. It's not, it's like at one point I didn't realize that I'm kind of cruel. I can be really cruel with my words, right? Like I could take a little shard of truth, sharpen it up and stab somebody with it,
Mm-hmm.
and really a quite unkind way. And I didn't realize that for a long period of time. And so all of a sudden I would, get a little wordy, and all of a sudden I've done some damage to a friendship or whatever else.
Mm.
And then once I like could really just see that my insight is both like sharp and useful, and that sharp insight can be really damaging and harmful. So once I could see that I'm both, like I can be really kind with my words and insights and truth, but I could also be really cruel. It's like that cruelness still exists. And I don't want to like make it sound like I'm never cruel, because sometimes I am, but I did it on purpose. Does that make,
Skillful cruelty. I see.
well, yeah, I don't want to make it sound like I'm like some
Mm-hmm.
perfect, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like not a perfect person, but it's fascinating that like once you can see that shadow, like I can choose how this is coming to be, so I have more
Right.
authority over it.
Exactly.
So with these like money shadows,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to like kind of like look at those, there's power in the choice, and I think there's power also in the expansion of the identity, right? Like when we get into those boxes, we can get really small there.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm only willing to be this like super clean, perfect
Right.
version of myself, there's a smallness that comes with that. And a lot of times, like when I'm working with clients who are scaling their businesses or whatever, it's usually shadow integration that gives them the power to like take the next level. It's like, like if you're all in your good girl,
Right.
you're not getting there.
Yeah.
It's like, or if you're all, people pleasing, or, there's certain
Mm-hmm.
patterns that come with that. And a lot of times it's shadow integration that helps to make the move. So I hope everybody will take a look at look at Hendrix's book, because I found it to be super insightful for myself. Like every single one of the shadows that I feel like I read, like I feel like nearly all of them I could be like, oh,
Yeah.
this is for me too.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I've done a lot of money work because I'm in money.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like this book, like I feel like I really got read for filth. Like I could really see myself there.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super, super helpful. Where can people find your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, Shadow Money by The Money Shaman. That's probably the easiest to grab it because, yeah, Prime one-day shipping is amazing. So go for it.
Yeah. And I think it's on Kindle too, right?
It is, yes. Correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know. Should I ask you anything else? Is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Gosh, I feel complete in this. This was a really awesome and adventurous exploration. I really love like that last point, right? Like what just kept coming up, right, is the authority piece you mentioned. Yeah, I think like without this work, without shadow integration, you're living a very narrow bandwidth of existence, right? And there's a lot of like pain and stifledness in that, right? And like, gosh, I felt like the room expand and life force expand the moment you said like coming out of those boxes and bringing other aspects of you back online and reclaimed to get you to where you want to go next. And I think we got to get bigger if our goals get bigger ultimately.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to do things that are right in one role that might not have been right in a different role. And so there's like a lot of judgments to play with. And I don't know. I love shadow work because I feel like it's just super, super fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that money's, like it's almost like the blood of life, right?
Mm.
It's like we have blood in our bodies that keeps us moving, but like that same circulation is how we use, we turn our blood, sweat, and tears into this money, and then we build a life with it. And so just being, like fully integrated and aware of that is beautiful.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Hendrix, for being with us. And I love you. And I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you all.